Mike, you ready? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the West Fargo City Commission meeting, Monday, May 20th. Please join me in a pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First order of business is to approve the agenda. It has been distributed. Commissioners, do you have any suggestions or additions?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Simmons. It's been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda as presented for Monday, May 20th. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is item C, approval of the minutes from May 6, 2019. Pages 2 through 5, they have been distributed. Make motion to approve. Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of May 6, 2019 as distributed. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is the approval of amended minutes, March 18th, 2019. Amendment on page 2, pages 6 through 10, they have been distributed.
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Thorstead. Has been moved and seconded to approve the amended minutes of March 18th, 2019. The amendment is on page 2. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is item 3, building permits. They have been distributed.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Simmons. Been moved and seconded to approve the building permits as distributed. Is there any further discussion? Proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business on the agenda is the consent agenda. Items A through I, and they have been distributed as well.
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Thorstead. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig. Seconds. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is the regular agenda. Item number 1, continued from 5/6/19, proposed resolution setting and the fee schedule for liquor and cabaret licenses. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President and members of the West Fargo Commission. This is continued from the last meeting. In the intervening time between the last commission meeting and tonight's commission meeting, the Liquor Control Board had its first meeting and had an opportunity to review the proposed fee schedule and recommended one change, and that was to increase the amount of the retail convenience grocery store off-sale liquor, wine, and beer license there was a typo, and to increase that to match the other off-sale facilities at $2,000 for the license, and that was the recommendation of the Liquor Control Board. That is reflected in the resolution that I handed out to you just tonight. So that was the only change that came from the Liquor Control Board. Just a brief update, we did have we did have the first meeting last week on Friday that we're starting up the Liquor Control Board, and they will be meeting the second Monday of every month. And I can't recall the time exactly that was set for the meetings, but second Tuesday. So I can answer any questions you might have, but we'd be looking for a resolution to propose or to approve the annual fees.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Commissioners? Mr. Thornton?
Make a motion to approve the resolution setting the liquor license fees.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Jurdevig, moved and seconded. Commissioner Thorstad moves, Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. And that is the proposed resolution setting the fee schedule for the liquor and cabaret licenses as presented by Mr. Shockley. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is item number 2, a resolution for lease approval for Pierce Fire. Chief Fuller.
Thank you. Commission President Dardis, members of the Commission, what we have before us then is a resolution to allow the city and the department to finance 2 pieces of fire apparatus. I came before you last year with the same lease from a different company. Due to circumstances beyond their control, they're not able to sell us the apparatus that we had spec'd, bid, and purchased. So that has been canceled, the order's canceled, and the lease has been canceled, and the money that we came out of our 2019 budget has been returned to us. And now we went ahead with the second apparatus company in our bid proposal, and they have returned to us their lease paperwork. They have 2 pieces of apparatus that we would be leasing for a 7-year term. Basically, the resolution allows for the city administrator or fire chief to act on behalf of the municipality for negotiating, entering into, executing, delivering the leases. And this is just giving myself and Tina the permission to do that. It's a continuing appropriation lease, so if it's not appropriated in our budget within a certain year, we lose the trucks, they go back to the company, and we don't pay the bill. So there is a clause on that. But it's in our budget for this year, it's in our budget for next year, and it's a 7-year period that we're looking to move forward.
Thank you, Chief. 2 pieces of apparatus.
Yes.
Briefly describe the 2 pieces.
We have one engine that's I'm going to replace an engine on the north end of town, and a ladder truck that's going to go to the south end of town. That ladder truck has a 107-foot ladder on it. That was the main requirement that we had of the initial process when we spec'd these pieces of apparatus out, was that it had to have a 100-foot ladder and had to be shorter than 41 feet in length. Due to the congestion of new development down there, we wanted to make sure we didn't buy a big giant truck. So those were identified 2 years ago as pieces of apparatus that we would need to put into our fleet. Thank you, Chief. Anyone else?
I do have a question, Chief. How long has, thank you, Mayor, how long has the fire department been leasing vehicles? I just don't remember.
First one.
That's what I thought.
Yep.
So now that I don't remember, I thought that.
That would be why, yeah.
So I'm curious to know why you decided or wanted to go to leasing rather than purchasing.
The price of trucks are going up. This is $1.5 million for both pieces of apparatus. They're with the steel tariffs, they jumped 20% in a year. And also the maintenance costs of maintaining trucks over a 10-year or longer period is just becoming way more than we anticipated. Last year we put 10,000 miles on one of our trucks. That's a 9-year-old truck. In the first 8 years of that life span of that truck, it didn't have 10,000 miles on it. So we're just running and running and running. The call volume's up. We're running these trucks more than we anticipated, and doing a lease puts everything under warranty. It goes back to the company at the end of 7 years. We don't have to worry about resale. We don't have to worry about fronting that initial cost up front. So it just it's more efficient for us. So.
And I know the city does that already. That's why I was asking in your case.
It's a very new thing for
in your
fire
case,
apparatus.
It's a little different because the city doesn't use the cats and graders as much as put that many hours on them, so it's a little bit more beneficial. In your case, I would think that you put so many miles on them that we would be paying a lot for the lease. That's why I'm just asking. Obviously, you did your due diligence and you're checking on this, and you still feel it's a better deal.
Yep, I feel it's a better deal. Absolutely.
Okay, good enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Anyone else? Thank you, Chief. It's your pleasure.
Would make a motion to approve?
Mr. Jurdevig moves to approve the lease for the Pierce Fire. Is there a second, please?
Second?
Commissioner Simmons seconds. It's been moved and seconded for approval of the lease for Pierce Fire. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is a budget amendment request for the IT department. Mr. Anderson.
Good evening, Commission President and Commissioners. Tonight before you, you have a request for a budget amendment for the IT department. The amendment is to allow us to purchase a new storage area network, which is basically what the city uses for all of its storage across all of our servers. So it's a single device that stores everything. Right now, the reason that it is a budget amendment request is that when we planned for this device 5 years ago, we had fewer departments, and the departments that we have added are adding data to our current SAN at a much higher rate. So GIS, engineering, and communications, photos, videos, all of our GIS maps, things like that. So basically, what we were looking to do was to put this into next year's budget, but we got pricing for it, and it's extremely advantageous to do it right now. Plus, we are very near to out of storage. We have 2 terabytes left for the entire city, and one of them is already accounted for an ongoing project. So there isn't much available, and it's causing some departments to put off projects that they would like to get underway. One example of that would be getting our data from more engineering and starting to have our own file system for previous projects, you know, sanitary sewer, water, towers like that. Right now we have all of that in paper form, and they actually have to go pull the files before they go start working on something. So I requested the company give me one more quote that I don't have before you, but I asked what was the price prior to all of my discounts. So the price that they gave me prior to the discounts was $143,801.59. So that is a discount of $33,551.72. So we just felt it was advantageous to do it right now, get departments moving on their projects and not being a roadblock. So speaking to other companies, we reached out to Exagrid and Pure Storage, and we asked them to put in a quote. Pure Storage, a national company, said they didn't even want to put in a quote. They couldn't get near that dollar amount. They said it would be a waste of our time. It's also, it would be much higher anyways because we're going to reuse what we already have. So with that, I'd be available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Commissioners?
So, James, I thought I read 110,000. You're saying it's 145, or it's 110 at the end of the day?
Yes, 110 with the $33,000 discount.
You just want to throw that in to make it look good, right?
Yeah. I used a coupon. You'd be very proud.
I saw the coupon.
You saw the coupon. Yes, you did. I put it in.
Yes.
So, and this was an expense you're going to incur anyway.
Yes,
in the
absolutely.
very near future, so.
Yep.
And it's a one-time.
Yes, one-time expense.
Do you have a projection on the life of this? added storage space?
Yes, absolutely. This will take us the 5 years, plus allow us to, the other thing that the data storage is for our backups as well. So it will take us the full 5 years.
Will this storage be on site?
Yes, it will be located here in City Hall, and the one that we currently have will be repurposed, and it will be moved up to Public Works as a secondary device should our main device go down.
I don't see a problem with it. I'd make a motion that we approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please?
Second that.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. It's been moved and seconded to approve the request for the IT Department's amendment to their budget for an expenditure of $110,000 plus or minus. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you.
Next order of business is a special assessment community forum recommendations. Melissa Richards.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. I'm just coming back up to ask for approval on the 2 recommendations that we walked through during the special meeting on April 29th. Before you is a handout that summarizes what those 2 main recommendations are. The first one is to further develop our managed growth policy to realize cost of growth. Noted below are the possible outcomes a managed growth policy might have. Once we have your approval, staff will go back and start working on these. Those policies include an infrastructure planning policy, a funding policy, a special assessment policy, new development policies, a capital improvement plan investment policy, and then formulating an infrastructure financing best practices committee. Again, those will be things that the staff studies, and they will bring back in front of you to review each of those individual policies and provide approval on those policies. The second recommendation is to implement a comprehensive communication process, and the possible outcomes from that are increasing communication to property owners and investing in tools and resources to easily deliver the information. Again, we'll go back and study and come back to you with a policy plan and budget for making that happen. We just want your approval on those 2 recommendations so that we know that we're moving forward in the right direction with using our time. And then the other pages in the packet is just the feedback that I received during the special meeting, and then following the meeting, a few of you had meetings with the Home Builders Association, and they had feedback to make sure that we're talking about possible outcomes. So with that, I'm open to any questions.
Questions from Mrs. Richards?
Mike, I just have one quick one. Okay, thank you, Mayor. I just have a quick one. So obviously the second one is pretty much definitely due. The first one, I just want to make clear that, from my knowledge, I guess now, that you're not making any changes at this point. You're going back to get us more information to make changes, right?
Correct. As you can see, these 6 possible outcomes are pretty major, and so it's going to take a lot of staff time and a lot of effort to come up with them, and we want to make sure that we have your approval to spend that time and to research those things before we go and dedicate a lot of time to it.
Correct. And are you also going to include other groups such as the Home Builders Association,
yes,
the Realtors
Yep.
Association?
So the feedback you provided
the industry that it impacts.
Yes. Yep, the feedback you provided at the last meeting, we have that captured here, and a lot of those things, the check marks about looking at the sales tax, studying what other communities are doing, working collaboratively with Fargo and Moorhead to ensure we're not changing things dramatically and creating unintended consequences. Well, those will all be included as we study and look.
Okay, and will we be going back to the citizens at all on this one, or will that be at a late when you come back again? They'll have an opportunity.
We can if we're looking at a policy and we feel like there's a need to go back out to the citizens. There's no reason we can't or we wouldn't.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Thorsten.
Do you have roughly in mind a timeline for this? I would think some of these items, for instance, I think Commissioner Simmons touched on the communication thing. That to me would seem like something we could get rolling right away.
Yeah.
I guess I'd rather see you come in pieces instead of assimilating a complete report and coming back in a year from now. So if we can do it in small chunks and you guys can identify which are the easier tasks to undertake right away. But
Yeah, thanks for bringing
Communications
that up,
too,
yeah.
so we can-
I meant to say that. We'll probably pick and choose on terms of the first recommendation where we want to focus and move forward, and they'll definitely come to you piecemeal so that we can continue moving, but the communication is a priority that we'll work on right away.
Thank you.
Anyone else? What's your pleasure?
I would make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Been moved and seconded, Commissioner Thorstead seconds. It's been moved and seconded, the Special Assessment Community Forum recommendations as presented by Ms. Richard, that we approve that. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is item number 5, the conditional use permit review for 16674 37th Street Southeast. Mr. Solberg.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just going to pull up the map here. Property in question here is just a mile west of town, kind of along the Raymond interchange, if you're familiar with that area. The property is zoned agricultural. There is a non-farm single-family dwelling in here, which is a conditional use. The property was deemed conforming because it was there prior to our having that ordinance in place. However, if you're going to expand upon that, you need to have a conditional use permit reviewed again. In this case, not a major issue. The property owner is just going to fix up the barn and add a little addition to it. I did note, however, to the applicant, and we reviewed this at public hearing and Planning and Zoning Commission, that the property is adjacent to a high-impact future corridor. We don't know if it'll be 5, 10, 15 years, but someday it's likely that that will be a big area of importance for us, and our comp plan speaks to that as well. So all we're providing here for a recommendation is that through the conditional use permit process that the applicant acknowledge that this is potential future growth corridor. Planning and Zoning Commission is recommending approval. If it were a larger project or a new home, I would probably have a little bit more uncertainty about it, but the fact of the matter is he's looking at just adding on to an existing garage. So not a lot of concern, but make sure that they're aware of that. The applicant is here and available for any questions if you have, as am I.
Thank you, Mr. Sobert. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Sobert? Or the applicant is here? Okay, what's your pleasure?
Make a motion to approve with the 3 conditions.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the conditional use permit review of 16,674 37th Street Southeast as presented by Mr. Solberg with the conditions. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 6. It was continued from February 18th, 1999. Conditional use permit review for the West Fargo Municipal Airport. Mr. Solberg.
Thank you, Your Honor. The application in question, of course, was tabled on February 18th. And I've been asked by the airport authority to bring it back up for discussion. Not a whole lot to add. Planning and Zoning Commission really looked at it from a use perspective and had no issue with it. Conversation at the meeting was primarily about the growth of the airport, and I understand that some of those questions have been addressed. So I'm available for any questions. Nothing really has changed on our perspective.
Commissioner Thurston.
I would make a motion that we approve.
I'm going to have you remove it from the table, please.
Remove what?
This has been tabled.
Oh.
Order of
So
business.
we got to remove from table and then.
You have to bring it back.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You made the motion to table it, so bring it back to not
I'd
table.
make the motion to bring it back.
Thank you, Mark. Been moved to remove from the table item the conditional use permit review for the West Fargo City Airport. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Jurdevig. Been moved and seconded to bring this item back from the as tabled on February 18th. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Now, I'll entertain a motion to approve the conditional use permit for the municipal airport.
I would make that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Thorstad seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the conditional use permit review for the West Fargo Municipal Airport as presented by Mr. Solberg. And it was tabled on February 18th. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business. Item number 7. Review a request from the Park District. Mr. Solberg, excuse me, and Mrs. Herbstasser.
Thank you, Your Honor. This particular application is for a piece of land that was dedicated to the public, a park property, and a piece of property that the Park District owns by deed. Those two parcels highlighted there on the map, and when the Park District approached me about this, they had some concerns about special assessments and then a potential future for this property. Given that they aren't developers and not really sure what it would become, I offered the opinion that it would be best to go through a planned unit development. Planned unit development is a two-phase process at planning and zoning. We do a concept phase where you propose a concept of what it should become, and our planning commission reviews it, has a public hearing, and if deemed appropriate, they approve it. Then they have to go back and do detailed development plans before they actually come back and develop it. In this case, our planning and zoning commission felt there wasn't enough information, so they denied it. Tonight, we're not asking for any action. There is no action to take. This isn't the Board of Adjustment. However, it's sort of at a standstill because the Planning Commission denied it. So what I'm looking for tonight is possibly some comments, maybe advice to the Park District as to what should become or how you may rule on this in the future. At the time that they proposed it to the Planning Commission, really it was not any particular development. It was simply a departure from a park. So it being zoned public, they would not be able to develop it. They wouldn't be able to sell it to anybody. So really the PUD was just a departure from what it was, and anybody who may purchase it in the future then would come forward with any detailed development plans, where we would again have a public hearing for the public to come and voice their concerns. So tonight I just presented to you the staff report. The recommendation of the Planning Commission is to deny it. However, I also included in your packet a letter from Barb Herbstasser and would offer her up to make any comments on that letter as well. So,
thank you, Mr. Solberg. Mrs. Herbstasser, welcome.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to appear, Commission President Dardis and City Commissioners. I prepared the letter for you and put it in your packet, as Mr. Solberg had indicated. And I don't know if you have, I guess I'm here to answer questions that you may have. We've been at this for a better part of probably since about January, and we've really taken, the board has looked at this very critically, really for about the last 2 years. And what happened last fall is we lost our access. Actually, last year we lost our access off of Cheyenne Street due to the redevelopment of that property. And I'm just going to highlight a little bit of the letter. And if you have any questions, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but as Mr. Solberg had indicated, we own both of the lots. Lot 63, which is the path, and he's got that, you can see that on the very left-hand side, the gray portion that runs through there. We are looking at keeping the path in Lot 63. And what we're really looking, and so that property was purchased by the West Fargo Park District from the developer, and then Lot 64, which is on the right-hand side, was actually dedicated by the developer. And so it's really become a very busy hub right there. It's very hard to get in and out of there. Even when we did have access, it was very hard for us to get in and out of there. When we actually acquired that property back in 2002, you can imagine that West Fargo looked very different. And what we had planned for that site and what it became really became two different things. In 2002, Eagle Run was developing, fully accelerated by 2003, and we realized that we needed to buy additional mowers, trucks, equipment. We needed a spot for our greenhouse. We weren't just a pickup load full of flowers and shrubs anymore. We were a greenhouse full. We needed to have an area to handle refuse and debris from trees that would fall down. So we had a chipping operation there as well too. So that really saved a big problem for us when Cheyenne Street developed, and Cheyenne Street development was very positive for West Fargo. I'm not here to say that that was a negative impact, but it's just really developed on that corner. We do see people access South Elmwood Park, which to the north and to the top is 65 acres of Elmwood Park, which we have right touching the border. That path gets used for people traveling in and out of the park. We don't see a lot of use. In the green space, there might be some people that might differ with me on that, but we really don't see a lot. We really feel that if we were back in 2002 knowing now what we should have known then, we probably would be in a different spot. But we really feel, you know, it's never a park district director or a park director never wants to have the conversation of giving up green space, and nor do our park commissioners as well. We do find that green space is very valuable, but given the change that we've seen in that neighborhood, it's really changed for us. And we really feel that that property could be developed for the betterment of West Fargo. And we have to think of, you know, all 535 acres of our parks. Back in 2002, I think we had about 115 acres of parks. So things have changed very greatly for us. We also feel, this map doesn't show it, but I know it was on the letter that I had sent to you. We've got space in South Elmwood Park, which is touching the border that, the acreage that we would be, you know, a portion of that acreage in Lot 63, actually, we've got space in South Elmwood Park for redevelopment. There's been some talk about the Park District accepting money for this, and yes, we feel that we would be able to, with the sale of this land, we would be able to reinvest in South Elmwood Park and give more amenities that could be developed in that area. We did have 2 public meetings. We actually went before Planning and Zoning on March 12th. And then we had 2 public meetings. We had one April 24th and we had one May 1st. We sent out 90 letters for the Planning and Zoning meeting. The requirement was to send out 45, so we did send out 90 letters. We had about 17 households that were represented from that. Why we had the meetings is we wanted to have dialogue with the neighborhood and explain our position and where we were at. We also talked about it at our May 8th Park Board meeting, as I detailed in the letter as well. The Park Board did make a motion on May 8th, and I know the Planning and Zoning was looking for a little bit more detail. Again, we're not here to be the developer and to say exactly what this site is going to look like. But one thing that the Park District did do is they said, we would like to see this be residential, and we would like to see it be low density. We would also, in Lot 63, keep the bike path surveyed to 62 feet on the western border, and then, again, specify no apartment buildings to be in that area as well, too. Any questions?
Thank you, Mrs. Erbstasser. Questions from the commissioners?
Barb, what is it you're looking for tonight?
Well, what we were actually looking for is we want to be able to move forward on this property. Planning and Zoning denied, and I guess, you know, it was to make a recommendation or not make a recommendation to the City Commission to be able to rezone and replat to a PUD so we can move forward on this, and that's what we're looking for. So we're really appealing this, from what I understood.
Mr. Silver, do you have some comments?
I can clarify, and maybe John can help out as well. Thank you, Your Honor. So what they would really need to do, if you agree with what they're proposing, or if not, we could schedule a public hearing to consider a rezoning to PUD in concept. There are no detailed development plans yet, so they have to come back for a PUD amendment later. We have other properties in town that are similar to this, to the west of Hornbachers. That's currently zoned to PUD. However, there's no concept or no detailed plans that have been reviewed. So that's my thought, is if you want to, you could go that direction. Otherwise, send it back to Planning Commission for review again.
Yeah, and maybe I could add on to that. My understanding. Mr. President and members of the West Fargo City Commission. My understanding is that the Park Board would be looking for recommendations to see if you think this is a fit for the neighborhood, and then once they get those recommendations, they would be looking to sell the property to a potential developer with those restrictions on it, whether those are residential, and the city does not have direct control over the Park District. The Park District's a separate political subdivision, so ultimately the Park District has their board has the authority to sell the property if they so choose. Both parcels are deeded to the Park District. The one parcel has no restrictions on it. The other parcel has a park restrictions on it. In talking, normally our office represents the Park District, but in this matter, we can't represent them. Talking to the attorney that's handling it for them, they'd indicated that they were going to work through that title issue. And so they'd be looking at this board for, are you okay with that concept? If you are okay with it as a PUD low density residential development, they would then go back and start the process of rezoning it and preparing the more complex PUD and looking for a developer to undertake the development. So I think bottom line is they're looking for the input of the City Commission on what do you think should be there and how do you think they should proceed.
So John or Tim, what is it zoned now?
Public.
So public. So the concern that I would have, Barb, is what you wanted zoned to, and I don't think you know yet what you wanted zoned, right? Is that what I'm hearing?
We would like to find a better use for it for the city and for it to be residential. And
what you'd like and what you're going to get are maybe two different things as well, right?
Yeah, well, we haven't come up with a plan because we don't want to pigeonhole ourselves into telling the neighborhood, well, it's going to be this, and it turns into something else. I don't feel like that's the Park District's place. We don't want to be in the business of developing this at all.
So from my understanding, the planning and zoning turned it down because they didn't have enough information.
Right.
Do you not have more information for them, or is
the information that, well, I was told that because we were denied that we would have to bring it to City Commission to appeal it, and I felt the one piece of information that we really needed to bring forward and we hadn't made a motion on yet was that it's residential, because we're concerned about what our neighborhood will be next to Elmwood Park as well, too. That is a concern.
So could you not do that at your board, then go back to P&Z, you mean? I mean, isn't that what you want to?
Yeah, we've talked, this has been kind of confusing because, you know, we've been told that we were supposed to come here to appeal it, and that's where I'm at tonight, I guess. We want to do the right thing.
Right, but you have to go to your board, right, to determine if you say you want to go residential.
Our board made a motion and decided that.
Oh, you've already made that motion?
Yep, and I had indicated that, yes.
Commissioner Orsted.
Just a few comments. Number one, I concur. I certainly would never vote for any commercial there, nor do I want apartment buildings. I want something that would be congruent with the rest of the neighborhood, and like you say, low density residential. And with the PUD, we have much more controls. I think whomever might be interested in buying that, I want to make sure we're upfront what their limitations are going to be, because we've had in the past developers buy something with the idea they were going to put something on it that the City Commission and Planning and Zoning was not comfortable with. So I want to be upfront with that. And I assume it looks like you're gonna merge those two lots are shown there now. They're gonna be more or less merged into one bigger one, because the accessibility will have to be from the west end, because we don't allow that off that. There's an island, I think, down the middle on 19th, and then we took away the one on Cheyenne Street. So all those things I'd like to make sure that are out there. Again, if you're looking for feedback. The other thing is just a comment on that. Along the river there's a sidewalk on the west side of Cheyenne, it appears. And if people want to go to the park from, the other side of the Cheyenne River, they have to go all the way down and around. I can just envision people cutting through the properties there to go to the park. Is there a possibility that a little piece could be stripped off along the river there to continue that pathway, so that people that are coming down Cheyenne Street walking or biking
I understand
could also go to the park?
that there's going to be a setback that they can't build within a certain amount of area. You know, that.
I'd just ask,
Yeah.
in your discussions or whomever is to consider that, because otherwise, you know, it's down here, people aren't even going to know it's there,
Right.
or they're going to
Right.
cut through whomever's property that is, and that always creates angst as well. But
Yep.
if you're looking for my personal
Look at
opinion,
that.
as long as it doesn't become commercial or a
Right.
high-density residential, if it's congruent with the rest of the neighborhood, you know, if it goes through the process, whatever that process might be, you might have to talk to Tim or whomever, is I would be comfortable with that type of development. Obviously, it's like John pointed out, it's the Park District's decision whether you sell or not. I know it's allowed by law. You're a separate board. We don't override you. We're on equal standing as far as that goes. So we're not here to say, no, you can't sell it. At least I'm not.
But we do have to approve the zoning, though. That's our...
Yeah, but they'll have to go through the process.
Right.
Mr. Soberg, do you have additional comments?
I just want to say, I mean, any feedback is good for them. If they feel like it's not going to go anywhere, then it wouldn't make much sense to come back. So we don't normally have a concept get denied like this. PUDs are usually concept is generally okay, but here there wasn't much of a concept. The concept was, again, a departure from what it was. They've now refined that a little bit. It could go back to Planning and Zoning Commission. Coming to you guys to find out some of your concerns, I think, is a good idea. So
I want to restate one thing that Commissioner Thorstad has said and Mr. Soberg has said, is that we do not have authority over whether they can sell this. And I think that's a misconception by the public for some of the comments that we've seen on social media and the like. The fact of the matter is that the Park District has complete autonomy as to how to do that. We have the authority on how it is zoned. Now, I'm going to ask a question of Mr. Soberg right now, and that is, with the covenants that have been suggested, the caveats as to whether or not residential or whatever, that again is the decision made by the park board as to the type of developer that they're looking for. The city commission has no authority to say, you know, we want this to be residential, other than when the permit comes through the PUD. Is that all correct? I just want to state that for the public and those watching, you know, that if they're going to engage in this discussion further as we move forward, that they understand that.
Yes, Your Honor. With the PUD, we have a lot of ability to work with them to make sure that the compromises are good for the neighborhood.
And it might very well limit the potential buyers that the Park District could procure for this piece of property. So everybody understands that.
Mayor, I'm a little confused, I'm sorry, but so my perception of this is that we have total control over the zoning. We can determine whether it's commercial or residential. We can't determine whether they're going to sell, right, but we can make sure this is residential.
In your approval, they're the applicant, so if they're going to propose what their application is, right, and we have the ability to approve or deny it. We also could technically go and zone it something different if we wanted to, but it's not standard practice for how we operate here.
The point that I was trying to make that about our standards that we have in planning and zoning are delineated as to how you can develop it. And Mr. Shockley or Mr. Scott or Mr. Soberg would hold all of those developers accountable for those issues that are delineated within city code.
Yeah.
If we start making up different city codes, then that's when Mr. Shockley has to get involved, and he would have to amend. We would have to go through the process of amending it. I just want the public to totally understand that when we say certain things about the zoning, it is as it is on the books, and there is some leeway and discretion that is granted to the planning and zoning and to engineering when we're dealing with these types of things. But those things that are stated are what we will follow. Anyone else? Comments?
So, Barb, could you go back to the planning and zoning with a PUD type of, concept and say this is what?
I'm a little confused at concept, because I think that's what we're not wanting to do.
But I'll be very honest with you, I'm not gonna support you saying you sell that land, all of a sudden it becomes a Caterpillar or something either.
Yeah.
You know, we wanna make sure, I want the same thing you want, residential, we all want. In my opinion, quite honestly, those townhomes are beautiful. I don't see
Right. That's what we're thinking
any
too.
difference. I know we had one email that said it's inconsistent with the neighborhood, but it's exactly the neighborhood.
Yeah.
The townhomes to me, are perfect. To the west, perfect. So I just want to get to the same spot that you're at.
Right.
And make sure that we would get there. That's all. You're asking for comments. That would be my comment.
Okay.
I guess the comment I would throw in, though, that might be slightly contrary to a few things, is to me, in rezoning, I think neighboring and adjacent properties have a lot of input on that. So to me, when it gets to the point of a public hearing, that would be something I heavily listen to. And I think making sure that what you're doing is getting those people on board. Because to be quite honest, if you buy a house next to a park in West Fargo or Park District land, I think everyone in this room assumes it's always going to be Park District land. And so, and in some cases, and I've heard this from a few people, in some cases you pay a premium because you're building your house right next to Park District land. And so I think, neighboring properties to me will have a large impact in any future decision.
I don't disagree, but it is consistent is all I'm saying with
True.
We got to hear them all, but I'm just saying it's consistent.
That's fair. Yeah.
So, may I make a comment?
Please.
So our next step is to go back to planning and zoning again with the concept.
Let's ask Tim.
I guess I'm a little confused.
Mr.
We have
Silver?
no potential buyers. We're doing this kind of in small pieces because we want to do it right. But I think it's caused a lot of confusion along the way, and I don't intend to bring that confusion to you, but it's been tough for us too. And
I would agree.
the homeowners have been patient that live along there as well too, because I know they'd like to know as well.
Mr. Silver.
Sure, Your Honor, if I could attempt to wrap it up. I believe the concept needs to change from a concept that departs from it being park property to a concept of what they're saying to be medium density or low density residential. If we were to just say we want to zone it R2, you wouldn't have that control that Commissioner Jurdevig's talking about where you can review what it is. So the PUD is a good approach still. The Planning Commission can then consider and approve, review, or deny whatever. But we have to have a public hearing at City Commission to actually approve it as a PUD, first reading, second reading as a PUD. Then when they come back, it'll be a PUD amendment. There'll be another public hearing later when a developer is actually found, but they still need to come through and rezone it, because today it's public facilities and there's nobody that can buy it, develop it.
Commissioner?
Thank you.
And vacate a portion as well.
So real quick, because normally the way this happens is landowner sells their land, they have every right to sell this land. A developer then normally puts in a contingency, says, I'll buy your land, but this is what I'll do. Why are we not using that same process?
They sure could do that if they wanted.
Wouldn't that be much simpler
But
and,
normally I'm
pardon?
so sorry.
No, go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, Commissioner Simmons. Normally that property is zoned ag, so there's a presumption that it's ag, preserved, ready to be developed. This is zoned public facilities. There's a lot of, I think, process that needs to occur because, like Commissioner Jurdevig said, the neighborhood thinks that this is park, and it's always been park. Beyond that, we also need to vacate a portion of this. The part of that property was dedicated to the public as a park, so there's process that needs to occur. I would say, yeah, go ahead, but that's going to be a really tough thing for a developer to come and jump on top of that, knowing that the property is A, zoned public, and B, dedicated as a park.
So, Mr. Silver.
Sorry to interrupt you.
What would your recommendation be to the commission with regard to both looking out for the interests of the homeowners that are in the area as far as the next step and process of what should transpire this evening?
Your Honor, really, I think you've done it tonight. You've provided them some input as to what you feel is a good approach for it. The next step is to continue on with the process, go back to Planning Commission, and engage the public again. We don't need to schedule a public hearing again. We could come back for review, I believe. Catch me if I'm wrong on that. However, the process with you again in a public hearing where the public can be heard needs to happen. We need to schedule a public hearing, first reading, second reading for rezoning.
So this evening, we're not making a recommendation, sending it back to the planning and zoning. It's naturally going to go back for their review. and then we'll stand by and react appropriately.
That's how I believe it should happen.
Yeah, I would just maybe some clarification. So with the input from the city commission, the park district would want to put together some type of a more complete concept plan. It doesn't have to get down to the granular level of, you know, how many units there will be, just PUD, residential in nature, a general description of the plat, those sorts of issues, submit that to planning and zoning, and a request to rezone it from public facilities to PUD, and then along with submitting a request for a replat. And part of the rezoning will take care of the public hearings aspect. You'll get input from the neighbors because of the rezoning, and there may be some issues regarding the replat that will take up the issue of the parkland dedication. That'll have to be resolved.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Any other comments from the commissioners?
One more comment. Just, Tim, I would suggest, and Barb, that you get the definitions of what the PUD is and send it to those neighbors, because they're the best thing we have going is a PUD. And for the neighbors, for their interests, they get total communication through. I think that will open up a lot of communication if they get that and read it and understand what a PUD is. I think that'll help a lot.
Thank you. I believe when we sent out the memo before, it was simply rezoning. Didn't have much in it, and so we'll ask if they provide a clear
a little bit more detail,
yeah,
so they can.
We'll send that very specific thing out to the neighbors.
I'm going to depart from protocol here a little bit. We have Mr. Frank Ledenmeyer in the audience that would like to make a comment. He was on planning and zoning for 100 years or less, or maybe. Mr. Lensmeyer?
Frank Lensmeyer, and I'd like to just touch briefly on the history of how we have so much beautiful parkland in West Fargo. Quite a few years back, the City Commission passed an ordinance regulation requiring developers to donate 10% of the property that they were bringing into the city for the benefit of the city, the community, for the entire community. At the time this went into effect, we had no parkland. We had very little. I think Herb Tintus gave us our first little park.
For sure.
And anyway, so this policy was for the benefit of the community. In fact, if we go back to the dedication of Armour Park, our oldest park, on the north side of Main Avenue, it was dedicated for the benefit of the community in perpetuity, for the benefit of the people of the community. That's been the policy behind the dedicated property of the Park District over all the years that I've been here. In the 80s, it was cut back from a 10% requirement. I don't remember the exact percentages, but it was cut back substantially. And in the 90s, I believe we got it back. That's about what I got out of the Planning Commission. Got it back up to the 10% and 5% for commercial properties, because the 10% was pretty heavy for commercial areas that weren't in need of parkland. The reason I share this with you is because when you go to look, the Park District is in a little problem here, as I see it, with the specials that are going to fall onto that property and what they can utilize it for. But I would just tell you that no matter what that property is used for, access is a problem. That's something that we have great heads in our planning department and other people in our community that can help figure out how we can utilize that property. That property was dedicated to the Park District, but for public use. That could make a possible site for our new library, which we need.
I think I'm going to have to stop you there.
Okay, but I would like us that we would at least research what can be done with this property to get relief to the Park District from something that they cannot utilize, and rather than move forward in developing more housing in that area. And I guess with that, I'm not here to promote something. I'm here to make sure that we look at the benefit of the community.
Thank you, Frank.
Do something with this property.
Thank you. So as Mr. Solberg has said, this is not an actionable item. Mr. Shockley has had some good input. Commissioner Simmons, Commissioner Jurdovig, Commissioner Thorstad all have. And so, Tim, we'll put it back in your capable hands, and and wait for the results of the planning and zoning to take another look at this, and or the park district to refine maybe what their request is. Is that correct?
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Next order of business, item number 8, is review the plot approval of Eagle Run Plaza 7th Edition, a retracement plot. Mr. Sober.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Generally, this would be on your consent agenda. It's simply a combination. However, the combination has been sitting out for a little while. It was part of a condition of approval for a permit here, and there was a number of other issues outstanding. We had issued a temporary certificate of occupancy that was expired on May 15th. A number of issues were addressed to a letter to the owner. There was a problem with the owner and their contractor, and so there was quite a bit of things that needed to get taken care of. The owner has made significant progress on this since we sent out the letter and revoked his liquor license. I wanted to put this on the agenda tonight, A, to approve the plat, and then B, to allow for the owner and our city administrator, city attorney to discuss any motion on moving forward. There are a couple of outstanding items. This plat being one, we'll get that resolved hopefully tonight. Second for me is the landscaping plan. Typically I give some time for that. We'll issue a certificate of occupancy as long as I have commitment from the owner to have that done. And there are some parking lot issues that talk to the contractor, feel they'll be able to take care of those. But other than that, I think most everything's been taken care of, if I'm not mistaken, Tina. And the owner is here tonight if you have any comments or questions for him, Mr. Robert Klingers.
Are there any questions of Mr. Soberg? And you're okay with the plot?
Yes, Your Honor.
Any questions? Comments? All right. If the owner is in attendance and would like to address the commission, you're welcome to. Okay. So, what is remaining on the punch list, if you will?
The landscape plan, I did get commitment today from the landscaper. I'd love to have the owner address that. Parking lot has some just minor issues. They need to curb a little bit of area in front of the entrance. Dumpster enclosure is getting finished up, I think probably right now. And I think that's about it. I don't...
Mr. Shockley?
Dustin, did you?
Thank you, Commission President. My understanding is that the property owner would like to continue operations at the location. Pursuant to city ordinances, staff sent them a letter to stop operations, specifically with respect to the operation of the business and the liquor license, because their temporary certificate of occupancy expired. Until all of the conditions are completed, they wouldn't be able to obtain a certificate of occupancy. My understanding is they would like to resume operations, so they're going to need to ask you as a city commission to reinstate the temporary certificate of occupancy. It's not something staff can do. I don't want to put words in the owner's mouth, but they should be requesting that you reinstate that temporary certificate of occupancy, which is a decision that's up to the city commission whether or not you want to do that.
To all those involved, is Mr. Soberg's summary of the items, the landscaping, is that, I know that there's a upper deck that's not been built or anything like that. That was all in the original permitting?
Yeah, we're inspecting based on what was submitted and what our requirements for approval are. So these are the items that we found. We're waiting for our call from commercial building inspector for us all to review prior to issuing the CO. And these are the items that we found. So I guess I don't want to speak for all city staff, but I'm okay with continuing the temporary for a couple weeks to give them a chance to get all that done, if the commission so chooses.
What was the commitment you got from the landscaper today, Mr. Soberg?
30 days, so June 20th. Yeah. And that's typical. I mean, we don't make people install landscaping in hot sweltering dry
July nor negative 50 February.
Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you. I am concerned about this individual project because if I recall, John, he opened without a permit at all. Did he not? Without a letter of occupancy when he first opened? Are you aware of that, John?
We had a temporary certificate, and I believe that was, when did you mind coming up here, Robert? Can you come to the...
You had a temporary permit from, I'm sorry.
The public wants to hear the discussion, and it doesn't happen if you're not on the microphone.
Okay, thank you. No, we had our...
Please state your name and address.
Owner of Hooligans. We had our permits and everything. We didn't open without one. So there was an issue like that. In the punch list, what happened is I got in a dispute with the developer. The SBA kind of put a clamp down on doing anything until that was resolved. Well, now it's resolved, and things were already in progress before we had gotten that letter from the city. So I think everything on that list is done besides the little curb in the front and then the landscaping plan.
I was on site 3 times today, and the enclosure around the garbage was not completed either.
No.
Just another small, I realize it's a small item, but just so you know, you've got a number of city commissioners. When we're dealing with staff and issues with what requirements are, we're all engaged.
Yep. So we couldn't, just on the garbage enclosure, the concrete for that back just got poured. So they didn't want to put up the fence since concrete was fresh. But
you had an excavator on the backside this afternoon at about 2:30?
Yep.
And there's a large area that's got large chunks of concrete and dirt and right off your patio to the south, which I think is a health risk, but what's transpiring there?
There's a drain that's in that little driveway right there, and they forgot to hook it up to the city, so they just need to excavate that, hook it into the city, and then that'll get filled in.
Any other questions from the gentleman?
Not from him, no. I have a couple other questions for our staff.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Dan, Chief, do you have any concerns out there? I know you've been out there, and I most certainly do, so I'll tell you that now. But
yep, our staff's been through there. The fire marshal's been through and inspected all their systems. So all we're mainly concerned with is entrance and egress methods, make sure that the doors are wide enough in the right locations for an emergency for someone to get out, and make sure their fire suppression, their hood system is working. As far as I know, with the fire marshal, all that is working. And that's all I can speak about. I think maybe the other issues with the trash and everything kind of out there is more code that would go back to Pierre, and I'm not sure.
I know I was concerned with the safety as well, Mayor, as far as the parking lot being, I mean, there was stuff everywhere when I was out there, so I don't know if it's gotten all cleaned up. I mean, not that we're here to nitpick, but it was bad, and it was a safety issue in my eyes. And so I guess thank you, Chief, and I guess Tina, are there any other issues you had, or John for sure too?
Commissioner Simmons and other commissioners, I want to say first, we sent the letter out, the police department delivered the letter, and the building owner came immediately into the office and sat down with him and myself and got the list of things he needed to complete. And to my understanding, like what Tim said, he has his landscaping to finish, which generally doesn't hold you up from a certificate of occupancy, but it was part of the problem in this case. He has the doors to put on his garbage where his dumpster sits, which he's explained what that is. I have no issues with giving him a couple more weeks to complete the couple of structural things he has left, and then Tim's office will follow up and make sure the landscape plan gets taken care of. He had a utility company go and dig through the front, which is where that issue came in. But other than that, he was very responsive once he got the letter, and I have no issues with whatever you so choose to, like a couple weeks or whatever. It's fine.
Okay. So I have 2 questions. Number 1, what is the definitive date? As per whatever contact that you had, Mr. Solberg. Number 2, what is the next course of action if that is not met? What would be, I want it cleaned up. We've invested a lot of time in monitoring this. I know that early on, when they were open, there were some health issues and fire concerns with regard to the hoods and all of that type of thing. Let's look at that as a water under the bridge. But we don't want to have our staff deal with some of the issues that we've dealt with on this project. So I want to know a definitive date as a recommendation, and I want to know what Mr. Shockley, what the course of action will be if that is not met. Because I don't want this gentleman here, this owner of his investment, I want him to understand the consequences so we don't have to deal with it on a Friday afternoon again. Please, Mr. Shockley.
So a couple of comments. First of all, I think the applicant should be requesting a temporary certificate of occupancy from the City Commission. It's not something we can't make the request on his behalf. So he'd have to come, stand before you and ask you for you to issue a temporary certificate of occupancy. From my standpoint, it could be 2 weeks to 30 days. That seems reasonable. If he's unable to complete that, the temporary certificate of occupancy would expire, and then I would put in as a condition that if he's not able to complete it within 30 days, that would be reported to the Liquor Control Board as a factor that should be taken into consideration in a non-renewal for his liquor license for this upcoming year for failure to follow through on a requirement by the City Commission. But once again, the applicant needs to make the request from you, which we don't have a written request. We don't have a request for anything. If he took no action tonight, he wouldn't be able to operate because there's no request in front of you.
Has he been closed down, John?
Yes.
He has been closed down.
So you may want to ask the applicant if he wants to request a temporary permit.
Sir, step to the microphone, please.
We'd like to request a temporary certificate of occupancy from the commission, please.
Thank you, sir. Any further discussion? Mr. Jurdovic.
Well, I guess I would ask the question, what is the timeline from your perspective to complete those items?
That is ambiguous, so I'm going to, I'd suggest 30 days from today's date. And we have a request for a temporary certificate of occupancy. What's the pleasure of the commission?
I would make a motion to.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdovic. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Thorstad seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve a temporary certificate of occupancy for hooligans. The 30-day time limit on that. Is there any further discussion?
I would just say that I'm going to vote no right now because 30 days is too long. I think 2 weeks is plenty. But that's just so you know why I'm voting no.
I just have one comment. We'll vote first.
Okay. Mr. Shockley, are you prepared what the consequences might be as to how many days of closure might result if these items aren't met?
What we would do is we'll prepare a draft letter to the applicant telling them that whatever action the commission takes, and if it is not completed within the 30 days, that it would be referred to the Liquor Control Board with the recommendation that they not be issued a liquor license for a full year. They could come back in a year and apply, but that's a pretty stringent penalty because without the liquor license, that's a major impediment to operating a business.
We have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the temporary certificate of occupancy for hooligans signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Sober.
Mayor, may I make just one comment?
Yes, sir.
Just for staff, is this a subject matter we should explore? I've heard of other instances where businesses they don't take it serious, a certificate of occupancy. They go ahead and they open up and they say, well, we'll get that. And, this isn't the first case where we've had people operating without one or have to get a temporary. I think it's something we should visit and put a little teeth into, that this is part of the building permitting process. You get it done before you open. And I I think we've had other businesses that have taken advantage, you know, and obviously we want to be pro-commercial, pro-business, everything else and help them out, but on the other hand, we don't want to be taken advantage of, so.
Thank you, Commissioner Thorstad. Additional comments? I too feel the same way with regard to certificates of occupancy, and that I think that the position we put staff in, both police, fire, inspections, is unfortunate. And Mr. Shockley, I would consider that as you review this and what that process might be and what the consequences might be, I'd suggest that we start with turning off the water, because that's an automatic health issue, that they cannot be open without water. And if we continue to deal with these types of situations, that would be my recommendation right up front. Thank you. Next order of business, item number 9, planned unit development amendment for 3020 32nd Avenue West. Mr. Sobert.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is the detailed development plans for a concept at Cheyenne 32. Original PUD here was left in concept due to timing, so each time they come in with a building, we're having to go through the detailed development plans on each one. Really on this, everything's consistent with the previous plan, very consistent with the comprehensive plan to continue with the mixed-use nature in the area. We're primarily looking at right now the balance of parking on the site, and the way we determine parking is a little bit different than the way that they looked at parking in this area. There's a consultant that they've used, and they're the same consultant who helped them determine how big of a parking garage they needed to have. They have a very strong method of how they do shared parking with mixed uses, and so their previous plan wanted 735 stalls for the entire build out of everything. Things have changed a little bit, so they're taking another look at that. Right now, the overall site has 601 stalls. That's, of course, minus 2 buildings. So I think right now we're okay. There's going to be adequate parking for the area. But I just want to bring that to your attention because, one, the developer is working with the school district trying to get a shared parking agreement with them. The hockey arena was required to have 224 parking spaces. They have available 412. So there's a surplus there of 188 spaces. But they also are going to redo this methodology on the parking plan and bring that back to us as they come forward with future development. So right now I'm having no concerns with this building. It's a beautiful building, 6-story structure. We'll house Bell Bank on the first and second floors along with some other office space. And then floors 3 through 6 will be residential. So Planning Commission at their most recent meeting held a public hearing, reviewed the application, and are hereby forwarding their request for approval.
So this is an actionable item?
Yes, sir.
Commissioners, what's your pleasure? And make a motion to approve? Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Simmons, second by Commissioner Thorstad. Is there any further discussion? So, in this development, or any development for that matter, they hire an expertise to reevaluate the parking that's available. And obviously, Tim, with your experience and your education and all that type of thing, you have formulas that you use. Why such a discrepancy of 601 to 735?
Actually, 735 stalls is what their consultant has come up with their target point. They have 601 available. That 735 number is after the next building, and the building after that would get built. That would be their demand. My requirements would actually probably be a little bit higher because we don't take into account the different times of use that they're taking into account. So it's actually, the tough thing about this whole thing is that I can't just go back and redo it. I kind of have to trust the methodology that they use to do it. Ours just isn't as advanced to determine, well, this office is going to be 8 to 5, these residential places are going to be overnight. It's just
a lot of applied science to figure it out from the clock.
Typically, parking is really simple. You look at case studies throughout the area. That shopping mall needs this much spaces, so we're going to have that much spaces. So it's pretty simple. They've actually made it a little bit more difficult. So I have to trust them a little bit. And it is, the Walker Parking Consultants uses a methodology formulated from the Urban Land Institute, which does a lot of parking in major downtowns. And so I'd say they're quite a bit smarter on this than I am, and I trust them. But the idea here is we want to make this space as efficient as we can. We want to get as much demand there, and we don't want to have Black Friday parking, so we don't want to have a big parking area for one day of the year. If there's one day of the year and it happens to be a tough night to park there, well, we did our job, I think. Whether you agree with me or not on that is...
my only concern is I do believe that this is going to be marketed as a real destination point within our community. And anytime that you're going to reduce the number of parking potentially reduce the number of parking stalls, that concerns me, because I do believe it will be a destination point.
Absolutely. There'd be a more robust look at it when they would propose the next building. Right now, I think that we have adequate parking.
Okay. Anyone else? What is your pleasure? Did we do that? I got it. All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the planned unit development amendment for 3020 32nd Avenue West as presented by Mr. Solberg. Any further discussion? Hearing none, proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carried. Thank you. We're going to go back to an item, Mr. Solberg, that you had, and that is in the language when we were talking about Eagle Run Plaza 7th. I don't believe I stated in the motion that it's the final plot amendment also. We were talking about the temporary certificate of appointment. And I thank Mr. Jurdevig and Mr. Simmons here for calling that to my attention. So either by amendment, we add to the discussion with that item, or we start with a new motion. How about a new motion?
If I could correct you, Your Honor, it'd be a final plat approval. So the actual Eagle Run 7th plat would be the final plat approval there.
Okay.
Do you want a new motion on that?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Second, please. Second. Second by Commissioner Jurdevig. Final plot approval of Eagle Run Plaza 7 addition, a retracement plot, as presented by Mr. Solberg. Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 10, access request for Form Communications First Edition. Mr. Solberg.
Thank you, Your Honor. Form Communications First Edition was previously approved by the City Commission. At that approval, it was noted that when they come in for a building permit, that any access to both 9th Street and Main Avenue would need to be approved by the City Commission upon recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So we brought this before Planning and Zoning Commission for review. Planning and Zoning Commission denied it on its face because the applicant at that time didn't change any of the proposals. With our review in it to our staff, we sent it to police, fire, public works, city engineer. We did receive one comment from the public works director that he felt that due to the railroad to the north, the north access along 9th was potentially there's some conflict there with the railroad, and that he felt that potentially just one access on 9th would be appropriate. During our conversation and review at Planning Commission, city engineer felt that potentially it would be okay to have two accesses onto 9th Street. However, taking note of the public works director's concerns that south approach should be moved north to not interact with the what we call the functional area of the intersection. That area there on that south end actually gets into a point where you're starting to get into that right turn lane to head west. And if moved north, then that other access may need to be moved north as well to maintain access spacing guidelines. There was no concern noted on the right-in, right-out accesses at Main by staff. However, Planning Commission just wanted to see, you can maybe see my little hand moving here, that access just be moved slightly to the west to not interfere with the left turn lane here off of Main, so people don't try to do a silly maneuver there. Other than that, they were comfortable making that recommendation to the DOT that those comments or that those access points would be okay. A traffic impact analysis was required and primarily dealt with traffic. One concern we noted on that was that the traffic coming out of the location is really difficult to nail down because it's a spec building and they don't really know how many trucks will be there. So it was hard to say, whether or not this would have a great effect on operations. However, the operations weren't greatly affected by coming out of there, so it was felt that L2 should probably be acceptable. I don't believe that the applicant was too excited about two approaches. They do have some concerns on operations within the site, and so I'd recommend that you give them the opportunity to speak to our comments. But the recommendation before you from the Planning Commission was essentially deny it as it stands. However, they'd be open to getting rid of that north approach and coming to two approaches on the 9th. And City Engineer, Public Works Director could probably add to this if I didn't catch anything.
Thank you, Mr. Sobert. Additional comments from staff? Mr. Scott.
Thank you. Mr. President and members of the Commission. I'll just reiterate that, our concern with that access closest to the 9th and Main Avenue intersection, that access would need to move north to be out of that functional area. I did some looking just briefly, and it appears it would have to go anywhere from 50 to 100 feet north, but that entire driveway, which at this point the plan shows a 50-foot wide driveway with additional 10-foot flares on each end, so we got about 60, 70 feet wide of a connection on the 9th. All of that would need to be outside of this functional area of the intersection. The other point I'd like to make is that, we discussed this at our last meeting, but we're currently in the process of a corridor study on 9th, so MetroCog has commissioned this corridor study. We're in the early stages, but the results of this corridor study are going to point us into the direction of what we're going to plan to build. I foresee that, in the 5 to 10 year window, we'll be out here reconstructing this corridor, and with that comes access control and medians. And so part of our concern is we don't want to come after the fact and, as a city, be the bad guy and telling those that are operating here, the employees, so on and so forth, that whatever access is there is now going away. So we'd rather deal with this up front. And the north access kind of speaks for itself. It's really close to the railroad, but one thing that we've kicked around is the potential of a below grade crossing there, or grade separation. So with that, we would need significant room to reconstruct that area for a below grade crossing. So that's really the basis of where we're coming from. When I've looked at it, I'm not a site engineer, nor do I want to give them any kind of directive on how to modify this thing, but shifting that south driveway a little further north and the other one a little further north, it's still doable. That you don't have to move the buildings around. My point is you don't have to reconfigure the entire site. Just move the driveways, and the turning movements should work out. So I guess with that, I'll let Chris say for words.
Mr.
Mayor,
Brungart.
Commissioners, I'll just add a couple of more comments to Dustin's. I was a little bit more conservative on my recommendations of having a single access there somewhere in the middle. I'm concerned about the future growth in the area. Once the Fargo diversion is constructed, and this is a major access road going all the way up to County Road 20, I think it's going to carry a lot more traffic in the future. So I'm very concerned about the functional area, how the size of that's going to be to the south end of it, and with the potential of the grade separation, that my recommendation was one, but I do agree with Dustin and Tim that two would probably be operational also.
At any time in recent history, has 9th Street ever been one of those items on your CIP?
That section
9th Street north of Main Avenue?
It's not currently in our short range.
That's a 5-year, when you say short range, 5 years?
Short range is 5 years, correct.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else?
Yeah, Chris, is that now where we're working with Fargo up on 9th Street, like 12th Avenue? Further up?
Correct.
Where they actually, okay, so you're right, this is going to be a high traffic area when the diversion goes through.
Correct.
This will be a high traffic area, so we're going to definitely want to be careful with it, I don't see this working very well, quite honestly, as I'm looking at it.
I think we've learned a few lessons, like 9th and 13th, and we have a lot of accesses here, and I just want to have a little bit farther vision in the future, just to make sure that we don't relive the same mistakes we had in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'll just reiterate my concern is the north one. The other two I'd leave up to the staff, I guess, to determine that. But the north one, if we put an access point there, it eliminates the possibility of an underpass or even a quiet zone crossing. We've met with the railroad on that in past years, and I concur with what Commissioner Simmons is saying. That's our. Right now, it's not really configured for a straight shot. That's the only road we got in West Fargo that goes north to south of our potential boundaries someday. Everything else stops at some point. Cheyenne Street and First Street and Center Street and they all stop at a cross-arterial road. So I don't want to see us getting hamstrung here and all of a sudden we come back and, their operation depends on that entrance and we take it away from them. That's always tough. Because then we have a lot bigger problems. It's a lot easier to address it now than it is to come back and do it later, and leave our options open. Like you say, we're doing a corridor study, and in 5-6 years that could change a lot up on the north side, depending on again where the diversion goes. Fargo.
Having been a resident in West Fargo for a long time, I would guess for the last 20 or 25 years, the question's been asked are what are the owner's going to do with this property, and now the owners have stepped forward and are asking the city to take a look at this, and quite honestly, it surprised a lot of us as to the type of buildings and the land use that they were going to initiate here. But the point being is that if this area is going to be developed and continue to develop, they've done some preliminary grade work out there. The nature of this is a lot of large truck traffic. So I respect the fact that planning and zoning and the engineering wants to be very careful, if you will, and Public Works, as to how this works. But at the same time, this is a major development within our community, and we have to, I believe, take a serious look at the possibilities of how this might work for both parties, for the city and for the developer and or owners. And so with that said, I am hopeful that they can continue to have dialogue with all of the necessary department heads of the city of West Fargo to try and find a resolve to this. I don't know about any of the rest of you guys up here at the table, but you ever driven a semi? I have.
Yes.
Oh, okay, they're hard to turn. So, are the owners and or developers available for comments? Please step to the microphone. Please state your name and who you're with.
Good evening, Your Honor, City Commissioners. My name is Troy Mallow, and I'm the architect and also the builder with Olaf Anderson Construction and representing the owner. If I could, I'd just like to go over just a few figures with you, just so it paints a little clearer picture of the spacing that you're looking at on the map. From 9th Street going north from Main going north on 9th, that first access point would be 388 feet. It's roughly 50 feet within that, what did you call the
functional area?
From there to the next approach, it's 424 feet. From there to the northernmost approach is 397 feet. And from that approach to the crossing arms of the railroad is 190 feet. So that's just for your information. As Tim mentioned, that we were required to provide the traffic study. That was done along 9th. That study supports those locations as 9th is today. We know that. And I guess from a designer standpoint, we've done many projects together with this owner. The importance of efficient truck movements was paramount in this layout. not only off of 9th, but getting efficiently to the building and not crossing autos with truck traffic, because that's a safety concern. So the northernmost approach really is for auto traffic, not truck traffic. When it comes to Main Avenue, going west from 9th, that first approach is 597 feet. From there, going west is an additional 480 feet. So the lane that crosses the median is 511 feet from 9th. So it's 86 feet east of where our middle approach is what I'll call it. And the only eastbound turning lane in that whole development is the eastbound turn onto 9th. The other crossing one is a western crossing only. So for people to come out of our development, they would have to go east 86 feet and then turn all the way around 180 degrees to go to a west only to cross that. So, and just lastly, Troy Gilbertson with the DOT has confirmed that they are okay with those locations as we've shown, but obviously we will work with the city on that recommendation. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So I have a question for Mayor before you step down. So you said, I realize the analysis has been done, but it's done at today numbers. And you said, well, this will work fine for today. I somewhat understand that. I think we've said what our concern is, not today, the future. So if that diversion, when it goes through, this is going to be a major thoroughfare going north. I can only imagine, Chris, you could probably tell us more, how many more vehicles. I'm concerned that that's going to not only interrupt your trucking system there, but it's going to be a safety hazard as well. I mean, if we have, Chris, how many cars are you thinking would we can't predict that, I suppose, but it could be another 45th. It could be, isn't that a concern to you folks as well?
Absolutely. As a designer, all of us would love that crystal ball and know what that's going to be. So when we don't have that information in front of us and there isn't any information available on that study, all I can do as a designer on behalf of our owner is to design to the district standard.
So you don't I guess I want to use the word accept, but you don't add in any extra traffic into this. This is just today's traffic.
Correct.
What you tell me.
That's all we have to go by. Yep. And I definitely see the concern on the very north approach with railroad. If you're looking at going to an underpass there, I definitely can see that concern.
With that being said, is there room in the discussions that the north approach would give the expression but go away? If we could continue to have dialogue as to how this best use this property?
Yeah, if I could speak for the owner, I don't think it would significantly impact the use of that north building because, like I said, it is auto traffic only through that approach. It's a narrower approach, and it wouldn't have any truck traffic through it unless the fire department wasn't crazy about pulling in that middle approach and driving through the car parking to get around that access or the north side of the building. It's wide enough for fire department standards for them to go through there and make those turns, so they could certainly get through there.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions, commissioners? Thank you. Mr. Sober.
Thank you, Your Honor. For us to issue a permit, I want to make sure that this is taken care of. We've been sort of given the feeling that this is so important to the site that issuing a permit would put us in a position where they now have a permit, but they don't have the access. So, Mr. Commissioner President and Commissioners, I'd appreciate if access of some kind could be approved tonight and that it's clear so that we know exactly where it's going to go. So if he says it's got to stay where it is and you disagree, a clear denial would give us the impression we probably shouldn't issue a permit. If they say they're willing to compromise, then I'd like them to state exactly how many feet and that for the commission to approve exactly that, so we know how to move forward. Because I think they want to get building, and I just don't feel comfortable issuing a permit if I don't know that.
Thank you, Mr. Soberg. Gentlemen? Mr. Arneson?
Levi Arneson, I'm one of the owners of this property, and as our discussion was last week, we understand the concerns, but we're here to develop that property and make it prosperous for the city of West Fargo. This property, all said and done, is going to be about $35 million. Quite a significant tax base just on property values alone. We're willing to negotiate on the north approach. We understand that that is an issue with the railroads and future developments on the road. We would be willing to eliminate that approach. As far as the middle approach, the one right in the middle there, it has to stay where it is. If we're driving trucks in and out, we can't move it north and have trucks take 2 left turns to a hard right into our building. That is the worst flow. The buildings are in order, it's here, that's how it's designed. I don't think that's interfering. So what I ask for tonight is if we can get approval for the middle approach, where it stands and where it is located today. And as far in relation to the south approach, again, we feel like it's in a great spot, but if we can negotiate that and if there's a way to work a way around that, that's how we would feel comfortable with tonight.
I have a question for you, Mr. Arneson, or maybe even the gentleman from Olaf. The approach that's out there today with the culvert, that is the north approach? Is that correct?
No.
Or is that just a temporary?
It's a temporary approach.
It's not sited in.
It's probably most closely positioned to the middle approach, though.
Okay. Thank you, sir. With comments made by one of the representing owners, what's your pleasure?
I guess I have a couple questions for our staff again, Mayor, if I could.
Please.
Okay,
Sure, sir.
Chris and Dustin, can you get on board with this? If we.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yep.
I'll just reiterate again, that south approach is in the functional area of the intersection, so that needs to shift.
Hey, they're willing to talk about that, though, correct? And they're willing to give up the north approach. You just want the middle one for sure.
And where it's at, yeah. The only
Okay
thing
with that?
Yeah, I would just like to confirm what is the spacing there. Once that south approach is shifted to the north, are we still at a 330-foot spacing?
I have a question. The gentleman representing the property, would you consider staking those to give us a visual perspective? Just lath with the red flags on it or something like that? For us, not for you guys. Obviously, you guys know what you're doing and you can scale everything, but maybe from a perspective of the commissioners, just to give us a visual perspective.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Thank you, sir.
And to answer Dustin's question, right from where we show it today, it's about 40 to 50 feet within that functional area, and there's 420 feet between that middle approach and that south approach, so we could shift it out of the functional area and still meet your 330. Also, that approach on the south side doesn't have a 50-foot width. The middle one does.
Okay, yeah.
So that helps.
That's the other thing that would be good is a dimensioned site plan.
Sure.
Yep. But yeah, if we can get a revised dimensioned site plan that shows the distances from the property lines to these approaches, the widths of the approaches, where the flares of the approaches are going to be, and just confirm that the 330-foot spacing is met between that south one and that middle approach, and that south approach is out of the functional area, and of course, eliminate that northern approach that is close to the railroad. So that'd be good.
Excellent. Thank you. Further comments, Chris?
I gotta say, I agree with Dustin on this. I think, we get that up out of the functional area of the intersection. That's the biggest safety issue right there about queuing back into oncoming traffic, like stacking. I think there's some things we can do in the future. If we reconstruct this roadway with dual lefts and things like that, we could make our functional area smaller. But I think right now it's probably a fair compromise to get that moved north out of that functional area and have that middle approach.
Thank you, Mr. Brengart. Mr. Soberg.
Your Honor, so if I could get a motion from the commission that approves the middle access to 9th Street and that the south access be moved out of the functional area, and a recommendation to approve the access points on Main Avenue would be done.
Is that okay with you, gentlemen, what he just said? I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Is there any further discussion?
That eliminates the north one then, right? Which was my concern. Okay.
Good. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Staff, thank you for your attentiveness to this in detail. Gentlemen, thank you for coming with us this evening and visiting with us. Thank you. Next order of business. Item number 11, review the engineer's report for Street Improvement District number 2254. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Commission President Dardis and members of the Commission. So this item here is an engineer's report for the Street Improvement 2254, which is the street that is going to be placed just on the north side of the parking ramp being planned with the Cheyenne 32 project that we reviewed 2 items ago. More of a formality, but I want to at least touch on what the projected cost is going to be, and then remind the Commission that when we created this district here, that the special assessments are specifically going to be assessed within the development properties only. So no other properties outside of this local development are going to receive an assessment for the project costs. Specifically, as you can see here, zoom in a little bit. Again, just shows the roadway here that we're planning. Here is the parking garage, and to the north is another PUD development with Eagle Ridge parking. Based on the construction estimate, they're looking at roughly $215,000 worth of construction costs, which is going to translate into a $263,000 overall assessment. So at this point, I'm just looking for a motion to approve the engineer's report and authorize the engineer to prepare the final plans and specs for construction.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Scott, has the owners of these, the 2 owners of these properties been made aware of that number?
Yes, yes, they have.
Thank you. Commissioners, your thoughts?
I would make a motion to approve the engineer's report.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Thorsted seconds. Been moved and seconded to accept the engineer's report for Street Improvement District number 2254 as presented by Mr. Scott, and for $263,000 is the assessment to the 2 property owners. For any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item, number 12, is to review the bid results and engineer's statement of cost for sewer, water, storm, and street improvement district number 1321. Mr. Scott.
Thank you again, Your Honor, and members of the Commission. So we've opened bids. The next few items here are bid results. Quite a variety of results over the 4 projects that we opened. This specific one here is for the Wilds 11th edition, and if you recall, there are some regional components tied with this local development, specifically for items like stormwater retention. So at any rate, we did have a public meeting a while back, a neighborhood meeting, to try to get the word out to the other properties that are already living out here, that this project is coming forward and that there is an implication of regional assessment. So the bid results themselves I'll get to. I just want to speak on that regional assessment. Right now, when we had the neighborhood meeting, we estimated about $1,000 per residential household out there. And based on these bids and the preliminary assessment that Moore Engineering has done, we're still in that same ballpark. So the regional assessment at this point, we're right on par. Overall, as a project, our engineer's estimate is about 15% less than the bids, meaning the bids came in higher than we were anticipating. The engineer's report was developed back in January of this year. And again, that is what was 15% off. The updated estimate that was used at the time of opening the bids, that particular estimate is 5% lower. So, point being that the bids came in high. We have spoke with the developer, as the majority of these costs now are going to be borne by the properties he owns. He was 100% supportive of moving forward. He doesn't feel that if we rebid this, the prices are going to get any cheaper, so he did ask us to recommend awarding the contract. So, with that, the information in the packet is here. There's an engineer's statement of cost where I basically go through, engineering prepares the bid results. I go through and sign a statement of cost indicating what we are, again, at this point, still estimating the overall project cost and then the correlating assessments to be. So with that said, moving forward here, I'm going to, at this point, recommend awarding a construction contract to Dakota Underground in the amount of $3,993,478.55. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Commissioners? Do you have an idea of the breakdown of existing residents that are in this versus the developer? The developer wants you to proceed. Are any of these lots or properties are the built? I mean, you know the percentage of who has what?
Well, really the only other properties that are what I would consider outside of the localized improvements, the existing homeowners out there, their contribution level is roughly $1,000 a lot. In fact, I can get the actual total dollar amount. So the majority of the cost is for the localized improvements, which are lots owned by the developer. Now, of course, he's in the business of developing with the intent to sell. So once these improvements are installed, and I'm sure he's already got options, but once these improvements are installed, I'm sure he's going to exercise options that he has and turn around and sell these lots to builders and or other owners that would, or other candidates that would want to own the lots here. So, again, at this point, we haven't communicated out to the other neighborhood or the rest of the neighborhood, but like I've said, the neighborhood meeting we did have with them, we estimated $1,000 for this project, and we're still at that number. So I think we're pretty comfortable proceeding at this point.
Okay. Can you do one more favor for me, please, Mr. Scott? Define the street improvement. Now, does that include lighting and all of those types of?
Yes.
That's all included in there.
Yeah, so it's a good question. So when we say that it's a sewer, water, storm, and street improvement, the street component is going to cover things like the multi-use paths, sidewalks, street lighting, striping, of course, the streets, the curb and gutter, all the necessary surface components, if you will. Even the boulevard seating, whatever trees we're planting, those components are going to be considered the street. The stormwater, kind of self-explanatory, retention pond and the storm piping, that'll be, collecting the drainage on the site, and then, again, sewer and water. Within these types of projects, though, that's where we get into, there's various levels of what is considered to be a regional component versus a local component. So back to the stormwater, out of the stormwater improvements, there is a regional component of the ponds that we're installing, and that's where that's getting assessed to a larger area.
Thank you, sir. Additional questions?
Oh, yeah, just make a comment. And I know Dakota Underground's a good company with a lot of resources, and it looks like apparently we're going to perhaps award them a couple more contracts here, but just pass the word on that. Please keep their focus on Cheyenne Street, so we keep that, so we're not stealing, Rob and Peter to pay Paul to get these other ones going. You just pass the word on. Obviously, they're going to allocate their resources according to workflows and everything else, but we want to make sure that people understand our focus is on getting that Cheyenne Street done as soon as we can, because that is a real pain for them. So And they're a good company, and they got a lot of resources, so I'm sure they'll keep their nose to the grindstone there, but we just want to make sure that we're not spreading them out on a lot of projects to where they're not going to be able to give their full attention to Cheyenne.
Yep, absolutely. Excellent point.
Speaking of that, Commissioner Thorstad, how does that work, Dustin, now? Because technically, are they not in non-compliance anyway? As far as, are they not behind on the project right now?
With Cheyenne Street, no, they are not.
They're up to date on it.
They're up to date. Yep. The first milestone or completion date, if you will, for 40th Avenue is June 15th.
June 15th. Okay.
Yep. So at this point, they are not out of compliance. They have, of course, other projects. For example, 9th and 13th Avenue intersection. That completion date was last year. They're out there working again. They're out there working again on warranty type items. So that doesn't really apply to a completion that, a project is complete, something happens and they have to come back and fix something at their own expense. That's a warranty.
So who's on 32nd Avenue? Who's doing 32nd Avenue?
Northern Improvement Company.
Northern Improvement is the ones that are behind.
Yes.
Okay.
What is your pleasure on item number 12, gentlemen?
I would make a motion to award the contract to Dakota Underground as presented.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Thorstad seconds. And moved and seconded to approve bid results and engineer statement of cost for sewer, water, storm and sewer street improvement, district number 1321, $3,393,000. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carries. For the record, as Mr. Orsted talked about completion dates, I do believe that the contractors all across the city, the region, Moorhead, Fargo, bids are coming in high. And I think we need to take a serious look at some of these and be frugal with the taxpayers' dollars. Next order of business, item number 13, review the bid results and engineer statement of cost for sewer, water, storm and street improvements, district number 1322. Mr. Scott.
Thank you again, Commission President Dartis and members of the Commission. Eaglewood 7th Edition is another small subdivision with the majority of the improvements being local for that plat. Again, there is a stormwater retention pond that is included with these improvements, to which we did send out letters to the other residents out there, notifying them of the assessments that are coming with relation to the stormwater pond. Again, that letter, we estimated costs roughly around $1,000. Based on the preliminary assessments here that Moore Engineering have completed, see down at towards the top here, we're anywhere from $500 to $1,000, depending on the size of the lot. Again, this is a stormwater improvement, so the stormwater components get assessed out on a square foot basis, which is why there's a bit of a range there. Beyond that, though, with this particular project, the bids came in roughly 10% under the engineer's estimate. So I think we've got a good price here on this particular project, and with that, I will recommend awarding this contract to, again, Dakota Underground Company in the amount of $1,719,099.35. And I'm open to questions.
Questions from Mr. Scott?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to accept the bid results and engineer statement for cost of sewer, water, storm and street improvements of District 1322 for the price of $1,719,099 and change. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is item number 14, is to review the bid results and engineer statement of cost of sewer, water, storm, and street improvements in District Number 1323. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the Commission. This particular project here is a little less complicated. All of the improvements are 100% local within the platted area of Brooks Harbor 9th Edition. The bids came in roughly 10% underneath the engineer's estimate, so again, better scenario here with the bid results. With that, I'll keep it brief and recommend awarding the contract to Dirt Dynamics, LLC, in the amount of $1,018,496.56. And with that, I'll be open to any questions.
Questions from Mr. Scott?
There are no questions. I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdovig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the bid results and engineer statement of cost of sewer, water, storm, and street improvements in District 1323, better known as Brooks Harbor, for the amount of $1,018,000. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of approving signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is item number 15. Review the bid results and engineer statement of cost of sewer, water, storm, and street improvement district number 4063. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Commission. The project here is for the stormwater lift station out in the Wilds area. So for all of the development occurring south of 52nd Avenue, this particular lift station will service that entire 280-acre tract of land. The one complication here I'll touch on with bidding lift stations, the state laws require us to allow for multiple prime contractors. What that means is if we have components of the job that are specific to mechanical construction, electrical construction, and or general construction, we have to have the individualized bids available for each of those disciplines. Oftentimes with that, then we end up with multiple contracts, which is the case here. We have also the ability for a contractor to bid on everything, but we are required to take the lowest combination. So if we have a general bid and an electrical bid that from two different sources that are less expensive than a prime contractor bidding on all of it, we would go with the two contractors. A little more administration work, but gets us the best price. The overall bid amount here is, again, under the engineer's estimate. And with that, I will be recommending that we award two contracts, one for the general construction, awarding that to Key Contracting in the amount of $1,891,860.80, and then awarding a contract for the electrical construction to Superior Electrical of Fargo in the amount of $340,419.00. So with that, I'll open to any questions. Oh, I should state, I didn't touch on it, but the cost, the estimated assessments at this point, I believe we're looking at about 38 cents per square foot. And again, being that all of the different lots out there are various sizes, it's going to range depending on those lot sizes. But a typical lot is going to be in that $2,500 mark. A typical lot out there is roughly a quarter acre, if you will.
Mayor, do you want two separate motions or one motion?
One motion would be fine.
I'll make the motion to approve both contracts.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please? Second. Commissioner Thorstead seconds. Been moved and seconded to accept the bid results and engineer statement of cost and sewer, water, storm, street improvement district 4063, which is a lift station south of 52nd Avenue. The general contractor is Key for $1,891,860. Superior Electric for approximately $340,000. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I'd also like the minutes to reflect that this came in under the estimate of the engineers. Thank you. Item number 16 is review the amendment number 1 to the owner-engineer agreement with KLJ for Cheyenne Street Reconstruction Project. Mr. Scott.
Thank you once again, Mr. President, members of the Commission. So on January 21st, we entered into a base agreement for the construction services of Segment 3 of the Cheyenne Street project. Segment 3 is again from 32nd Avenue down to 40th Avenue. When we executed that agreement, it came with an estimated budget of $1,500,000 and an initial phase for the getting started with the construction stuff, the administrative type work tasks, the submittals that are coming through and some of those things. Out of that $1.5 million budget, we did agree to an initial cost of $150,000 to get us basically with the first couple months of work. So at this point, what we're doing is continuing this contract, we've refined the scope of services that we need now for Segment 3 construction, and based on those services, the engineering fee associated with that will be $1.4 million, $1,406,078 for this total agreement, which is again underneath the original budget that was identified in the agreement that was executed in January. So again, this is specific to Segment 3 construction services, which construction should be for the most part done this year, but will also extend into next year as we have punch list items that typically are done in the spring of the following year. And then I also want to remind everybody that with a DOT process and project, the administration process is a little longer. There's a lot more project closeout type stuff to do, so we anticipate additional work being done into 2020 for sure. But at this point, just asking for the amendment number 1 to the Segment 3 construction contract to be approved to bring the total fee up to $1,406,078. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Questions from Mr. Scott? It's your pleasure.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please? Commissioner Thorstead seconds. Been moved and seconded to review the amendment number 1 of the owner-engineer agreement with KLJ for Cheyenne Street Reconstruction Project to the total amount of $1,406,078. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Scott, you spent a lot of money tonight. Next order.
Jim's been writing notes on that.
The next order of business is item number 17, City Administrator's Report. Mrs. Fisk.
I don't have much to report, President and Commissioners, other than there's going to be a number of open houses for the elementary children that Melissa is so courteously lining up. I don't know if she wants to give you an update on that, but it's going to take place, there's a couple days this week and a couple days next week, correct?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Mrs. Richard.
So in West Fargo Public Schools in the 3rd grade, part of their curriculum is to learn about government and local government, and so we've been working with the elementary school curriculum coordinator to line up tours of City Hall and the police station. So they'll start on Wednesday and go through next week. There is a sign-up sheet somewhere up there. I would love to, we'll start them in this room, and it would be great to have a commissioner provide a brief welcome remarks so they can see your faces and get to know you. And then we'll split up and have half of them go to the police station and half of them stay in this room, learn a little bit more, go through City Hall, and then we'll switch. So if you could just write your name on all the ones you want to sign up for because you're so excited. We'd really appreciate it.
Can we just mark Simmons down for all of them?
Absolutely.
Here.
Go for it. Thanks, guys.
What day do we have to be?
I have nothing else. Thank you.
Melissa, if you could, if you can send us a little cheat sheet or something, what you'd like us to talk about, because we don't want to talk extensively and we don't want to talk over their head. If you got certain items you want us to touch on, please let us know.
Mrs. Fish, that's all you had?
Yes, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Construction updates. Mr. Scott.
Well, I'll, again, just kind of briefly touch on the Shine Street project. I think that's always on everybody's mind. So at this point, the contractor for Segment 3 is, as I just mentioned earlier, on schedule. They're working on various components, but 40th Avenue intersection work is starting to take shape. They've got some concrete down. So at this point, we are pretty optimistic that that intersection will be opened up by the due date of June 15th. Segment 2, there's a lot of activity going on within that mile north of 32nd Avenue. At this point, again, contractor is, as we know, is behind on that 32nd Avenue intersection component, or they're in here making up for lost time, I should say, or late time. At this point, we're still, again, optimistic that they're going to have this opened up by early or mid-June is the last report that I actually got today. So I think those are the major components that are again, really sensitive to the public, and the contractor at this point, both contractors are making every bit of effort to get these intersections opened up as soon as possible. There's other work going on 13th Avenue. We mentioned this at the last meeting, but these are just kind of cleanup items and some repairs that are being done. They should have some lanes back open, I would hope this week, but we'll continue to work with the contractor on what's needed there. And at this point, at the 9th and 13th Avenue intersection, really it's just the turn lanes that are reduced to just the one turn lane. So not a significant impact, but I'm sure, again, everyone's anticipating getting back to the full capacity there. With that, I think I'll just open it up to questions from the commissioners. If there's anything that's coming to mind between myself and Chris, I'm sure we can answer.
Was not the original thoughts on 13th Avenue with this cleanup work would be done by this Friday?
The original report that I got from Fargo or Apex, their consulting engineer, which we received back on May 9th, it said that work was going to be done within, within a couple weeks. So I believe when we were anticipating that work at the May 6th meeting, I did mention a couple weeks at that meeting too. So yeah, we're extended into this 2-week window that I mentioned. I'm hopeful that everything starts to get buttoned up this week. I did reach out to them today asking for an update or a report. I have not heard back from the consultant, but you're absolutely correct, Mr. President, that on May 6th I had said 2 weeks. So we're hoping that it goes by.
The other item I have a question on, and I've been driving these all over town, is 3002, which is Pioneer Place, the back alley.
Yep.
Those folks have been, their lives have been adjusted because for quite some time. When is that alley going to be? It's partially open or partially closed, whatever side of the issue you're on.
Right. So the confusion, or the confusing part here is we've got two different contractors working out here. We got the actual building contractor for Epic's project, and they're in charge of the surface components, so the paving and whatnot. The city's project really installed the utilities. Yep. My understanding is that I think there's a couple services to maybe go do a spot repair on, but I think for the most part, predominantly, the utility component of the work is complete, and I couldn't answer with any kind of confidence or certainty on Epic's private portion of that job and when that alley will be paved. It's something I can certainly look into.
Maybe by the next commission meeting, if you could possibly reach out, I'd appreciate it, Mr. Scott. Thank you.
Mr. President, I do believe that they're doing some work out there. They're planning to do a lot of this simultaneously with the diagonal parking up front. They'll be forming up and doing the curb and gutter work in the back also. So those two should be done about the same time. But I'll work with Dustin and get that.
Thank you, Mr. Brungart, but when might that be? Do you know when the diagonal parking?
I know they're working on it for this week.
All right, thank you, sir.
We hopefully get that done by cruise night, the front side.
That's exactly where my questioning was going when you mentioned that they're
all communications we've had with the developer have been very specific on that is the deadline for us. We absolutely need to have that open by the first cruise night. And I know when they were getting started last week to start removing some of the pavement, that part of their concern was that they needed a couple more things figured out and answered from staff because they needed to start so that they could get complete by the first cruise night. So that, believe me, is in the back of their minds, and they know that that's our goal here.
Then a dumb question. I trust the work they're doing is going to be congruent with whatever our overall Cheyenne Street plan is, so we don't have to come in and tear something out here in a year. I hope it's being completed to the specs, and maybe the specs didn't change between what they had and what the plan is, but you know, it'd be bad for us to come back a year from now and tear something out.
No, absolutely great point, Commissioner Thorstad. No, we've had extensive coordination with them, actually, with more engineering still in the middle of the preliminary engineering work or the design of the road diet project that we're getting federal funding for. A lot of the coordination has been really done by more engineering to be given all the technical stuff back to EPIC. So as we've modified some things, Tim, Chris, and myself have been involved, and more engineering has really been valuable in making sure that the technical, the specs, the details, how everything's going to work and line up so that we don't come in next year and we have a 10-foot offset and the diagonal parking doesn't match or look right. So it has been evolving, it has been changing, and thankfully we've had help with all the coordination, and EPIC's team is on board, and we expect everything will work out next year. So.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Any other questions? All right. Anything else for us on the construction updates?
The water tower, it's been sitting there for a long time in Brooks Harbor. That water tower, finally this week they're planning to, again, this one's very weather sensitive, but their plan is to get the cranes out there and start hoisting up the tank. It's going to be quite a process. More engineering is going to be out there taking time-lapse video so that we have a good, when this is all done, we can watch it within a 2-minute period at a commission meeting, but they're going to bring this thing up, rotate it, get it set, and get all the welding done, and so hopefully that water tower will start to look more like a water tower versus something else, more like a silo right now. So
the email we got last week said they were going to do that tomorrow?
Correct. On the 21st was they're scheduled to start, again, very dependent on wind, rain, moisture.
Sure. All right. Thank you, Mr. Scott. I'm sorry. Next order of business, item number 19, correspondence. Thank you. Commissioners?
Move to adjourn.
Out of order. It's been moved to adjourn. Is there a second, please? Commissioner Chernovich. Pretty good thing, too. Then moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.